For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, joined alongside Shotgun Spratling for instant analysis from USC's 47-24 loss in the Pac-12 title game to Utah. Shotgun, what were your overall thoughts from tonight?
I mean, basically it was a tale of two different games. I mean, when Caleb Williams was healthy, USC was rolling, and when Caleb Williams got injured, suddenly USC, they lost their mojo. They went from leading 17-3, being up, and he gets injured on the, leading into their second score, and suddenly it was a 44-7 run by Utah. They dominated physically against USC. And USC seemed to lose their confidence as the game went on, and I think that stems from Caleb Williams. He's the guy that brings so much confidence to the rest of the team, and when he went out, it wasn't necessarily that they were all deflated immediately, but they just did not have the same energy throughout the game. They couldn't get the stops, and even when the defense was getting some stops early in the second half and hadn't given them a chance, the offense wasn't rolling. Just nothing seemed to be clicking consistently, offense and defense together. Lincoln Riley said after the game that Utah played better as a team, while USC had some flashes here, some flashes there, but they couldn't put it together consistently.
Yeah, I think we got to mention Caleb Williams' injury. He mentioned after the game that it felt like playing with an old rubber band in his hamstring. He did bring up a Kobe Bryant quote just to kind of say that he was never going to come out of this game. But you could tell that it was very much hampering the USC offense. And we've said all season that he's probably the most valuable player in college football for just overall what he brings to his team. And we just wonder what USC would look like without Caleb Williams. Today was our first glimpse at what they looked like with a hampered Caleb Williams. And it wasn't a pretty sight on offense. 1 yard in the third quarter. They weren't able to run the ball because Utah knew that Caleb Williams wasn't able to move. It was just a terrible turn of events for USC after going up 17-3.
Yeah, basically they had to scrap their entire game plan. So, what they had planned, and you saw early in the game where Caleb kept some of the read options, which is something he hasn't done a ton of this season, sometimes just in the red zone. You saw it earlier in the game in this game, so it seemed like that was going to be a big part of their game plan. And Lincoln Riley said, the run game, when you take him out and you put an immobile quarterback in there, that completely changes those things with the read option and different things like that. So, and also his scrambling ability, his creativity, what he's done so well all season was obviously hampered. He still did it a couple times on a bad leg, on a pulled hamstring. Still was able to get out of the pocket a couple times and make some ridiculous plays. USC was getting receivers open behind the defense when he was creating extra time. And suddenly they weren't able to have that extra time because he just couldn't move around to get away from the defense as much. And it seemed like Utah's defensive front really feasted on the fact that Caleb Williams was immobile, and they were going up against an offensive line that didn't have Andrew Voorhees, and then later in the game didn't have Brett Nealon. You take two 6-year seniors that are All-American type players out of a lineup, and you're going to have issues, and you saw it in a big way for USC in this game.
There was a point late in the game where USC only had one starting offensive lineman in their regular spot, and you would argue not the worst, but the fifth best of USC's 5 offensive line starters in Bobby Haskins at left tackle, and even he hasn't started all games at left tackle this season. It's just a recipe for disaster when you don't have an offensive line that's performing at the highest level, a good defensive line on the other side, and Caleb Williams not able to move. And I think you saw that come through for the USC offense, and we've got to talk about the defense as well. They played well to start the game, but once USC's offense couldn't move the ball, it was kind of like the nail in the coffin for the USC defense.
And Lincoln Riley mentioned he said at the end that they got desperate and basically played panicked. The defense did, where they were trying to create turnovers and trying to strip the ball and do other things like that instead of just wrapping up. They tackled terribly in this game. There's no way to sugarcoat that. They tackled awful. And it wasn't Dalton Kincaid this time. He barely played in this game. He was used a little bit, particularly in their 2-minute drill before the half when they scored with 2 seconds left. After USC gave away 20 seconds on their punts with the clock running, they punt the ball with 20 seconds to give it extra time. So it was a lot of things. It felt a lot like the game at Rice-Eccles as far as the game flow early of USC jumping out to a huge lead. The second quarter, Utah kind of dominating that, working their way back in. And then you thought, hey, it's going to be a dogfight back and forth the rest of the game. But unfortunately for USC, when you don't have your talisman, you don't have the guy who's created everything for you this season, it they weren't able to keep up with Utah. They were getting a couple of stops, but they weren't able to capitalize. And a real big one, when the defense does get a turnover in that second quarter, and USC can't capitalize on it, and they go for it on fourth down and don't get it. And then a couple plays later, Utah is scoring on the other end. The explosive plays are what USC's defenders are going to be, having nightmares about tonight. It's just they had opportunities to tackle a 3rd and 19 play. 3 different guys get their hands on Money Parks, and he breaks free and goes for a 50-yard touchdown or 60-yard touchdown. And those type of plays are the backbreakers. And USC, even with Caleb Williams on one leg, they give the lead up to Utah. Utah goes up by 10 after a field goal. USC drives down. Mario Williams scores a touchdown. And all the momentum in the stadium comes back to the USC side. And 2 plays later, 3 plays later, USC gives up a 60-yard touchdown to the backup tight end. Like, those things can't happen. Even if you give up that long pass play, you have to make the tackle there. And their secondary didn't tackle well. Their linebackers didn't tackle well. Their water boys didn't tackle well. Everybody on the team, no one tackled well in this game. And that was the biggest thing. Coming into this game, some of the keys I talked about were protecting Caleb Williams. That didn't happen. Tackling and stopping the tight end. And they stopped Dalton Kincaid, but they didn't stop the backup tight end. And then I said a couple times on radio shows and stuff that first game between Utah and USC was a battle of attrition. You saw how many wounded players there were after that game. And I said if one big player on either side goes down, it could change the trajectory. And that's exactly what happened in this. USC just wasn't the same once Caleb Williams got injured.
And I feel like they've had some of their better players get injured at some points in the season, but there was not a back-breaking one like a Caleb Williams. And it just shows you how valuable he is to this team. And I want to mention something that you brought up, which is USC was up 17-3, had the ability to go up 21 points early in that second quarter. And I feel like while USC was 11-1 coming into this game, they're still 11-2, a great record for the Trojans this season. One thing they've lacked all year is that killer instinct, the ability to fully put a team away. We saw it in Arizona. We saw it in the Coliseum against Cal. We even saw it last week against Notre Dame, despite it being mostly a controlling win most of the way. They had the same opportunity today, just like they did in Rice-Eccles. I think the refs took it away from them a little bit in the first game, but today, that was all USC's doing. There's nowhere you can point to why they didn't put Utah away. Unfortunately, Caleb Williams goes down with an injury, but either way, USC had a big opportunity, and it's something that, while they've had a fantastic season, is one thing you can point to that just was never there.
Yeah, it's something that they will definitely have to grow into, and that's a product of a young team and, trying to find their way, I think, and learning who they are. But you look back at it, and it wasn't just that they could go up by 21 points. They were at the 3 or 4 yard line. They were at the 3 yard line on 1st and goal and didn't get in, had to kick a field goal. They could have been up 21-3 there. And then they get the turnover. It could have been up 28-3. And this place shuts down on one side of the stadium for the Utah side, and you take control. And very similar to what could have happened at Rice-Eccles, if the turnover happens in that game with the Kalen Bullock interception, and you wondered, would Utah be able to bounce back? Instead, it played out very similarly, like I said, and Utah bounced back, found a way to fight through their early struggles, and then they took over the game because of the physicality up front. We talked about, if Caleb Williams went down, the depth that they still have depth issues, and we've mentioned that multiple times. We've seen that at the linebacker position at times this season. We've seen it at the offensive line. We really saw it at the offensive line tonight when it wasn't just one guy down at one time. It was 2, it was 3 guys, that were banged up, and suddenly you're moving pieces all over around, and that's what we didn't know. We felt like USC was solid through 6. And then where are they going to be at 7 and 8? 7 and 8 guys coming in. Could they hold up? And with Caleb Williams not being able to escape, they didn't have much of a chance. Utah really feasted, like I said, on that front, that offensive line, and they were able to completely control the game in the second half outside of that one USC drive because Caleb couldn't move and the offensive lineman couldn't block anyone to give him time to throw downfield.
Yeah, and I think Utah deserves a lot of credit for their effort today, just like they did in Rice-Eccles, just like they did last year beating Oregon twice at the end of the season. They moved the ball, and they obviously can't change whether Caleb Williams gets injured or not, but they took advantage of every opportunity that the USC offense gave them, that when they got the ball back, they were moving the ball, making big plays happen, making the small plays happen on third down. USC, I think, only finished with 1 third down conversion in the entire game, which is just not acceptable for an offense that had been so good this year, and some credit goes to Utah for their defense, but also I think a lot of credit has to go to that Utah offense.
Yeah, I mean, Utah has been consistent, and it's kind of disappointing that they are not a team that could be actually in the contention. Losing that Florida game at the beginning of the season, hurt their chances to potentially be a playoff team immensely. And that's very disappointing that both last season and this season, the slow start for them has doomed them, because they've gotten progressively better as the season goes on. And you saw how good they are. They're a tough physical team. That's what they're built around, and they have a quarterback who makes the plays that he needs to make. Cam Rising has not run much since the USC game because he got banged up in that game, but you saw him take off a couple times. And then he was money over the middle, connecting on passes and whatnot with a lot of crossing routes, slant routes and stuff like that USC had struggled with. And then later in the game, all you got to do is get the ball in somebody's hands, and then USC was missing a tackle, so it didn't matter. Jaquindon Jackson was just running over people, literally ran over one of the DBs, just running through people. There were 3 or 4 yard gains where there were 3 missed tackles. And that tells you that USC had players there, had players in the backfield at times. There was one sequence where it became a 3rd and 2 after 2 plays, when USC, it should have been 3rd and 16, because they had hit Cam Rising in the backfield and missed the tackle. They hit the running back in the backfield and missed the tackle. So those things just added up. And then at the end, it was just bad technique, bad form, and like Lincoln Riley said, they panicked, and Utah's offense took advantage. They were running through, busting through all those tackles. They have big physical backs with Jaquindon Jackson, the former quarterback, and Cam Rising's a big, tough dude. Their tight ends are big and tough to tackle, and that's who they are. And they make you make those plays, and USC didn't make enough of them tonight.
Yeah, despite an 11-1 regular season and a loss here in the Pac-12 title, USC will have a lot of questions to answer this offseason. But there's still another game for them. Lincoln Riley kept mentioning that, we'll try and get things right before our next game. So USC still does have a bowl game. Chances are they'll play in the Cotton Bowl, with not the Pac-12 or the playoff hopes being erased tonight. Utah most likely going to the Rose Bowl. It's all speculation at this point, but we feel like USC's probably played themselves into a New Year's Six Bowl. Just depends where they get slotted, and we'll find out more of that. Overall, going forward for USC to the bowl game, to this offseason, to next season, where do you think that they need to look?
I mean, they just have to keep building pieces, and like the depth. The depth is the big issue right now. They're just not deep enough to be a college football playoff team, and I said it a few weeks back, and people got upset. I said they're not ready for the college football playoff spotlight yet, and one of the things is the depth. If you have one guy go down, at Georgia, someone else, another 5-star is stepping in there. At USC, they're not there yet. That's the difference between that type of team and where USC is at right now, and that was the big concern for me. And that's something that they're starting on Monday, because the transfer portal opens. They will be hitting the transfer portal looking for some impact players. Obviously, they got a ton of impact players this year, but you're going to have to add depth to it. It's not just going to be the top-end guys, the Jordan Addison, the Caleb Williams. It's going to be adding those second stringers, those third stringers. When you do have an injury, who can step in and make plays? And that's something where USC has had some issues this year when their stars have gone down, stepping up outside the wide receivers and outside of Austin Jones. You would say the last 2 games, they've struggled to have people step up in some of those places where they've had some injuries. And it's just unfortunate for USC that this is the way the Pac-12 season ends for them. They'll see where they go with the bowl game. Obviously, Utah is going to go to the Rose Bowl as the Pac-12 champions. USC could go to a number of places. So we'll see where they end up, if they end up in the Cotton Bowl, whatnot. First, it'll be Monday the transfer portal opens. Next Saturday, we'll see Caleb Williams. I believe it's next Saturday. We'll see him, winning a trophy and carrying it off in New York. He did nothing but earn even more points. I think this, with how, the fact that he injured himself on such a spectacular run, and continued to play, and then threw for 360-something yards, I think it was, despite the injury. He did have 2 turnovers. One of them, the very last play, where he's just trying to make something happen. The first fumble lost by the USC offense all season long, which is a ridiculous stat. Which it was on 4th down. You kind of wish he would just fell on it so that they could keep that stat. But he played fantastic despite the injury. He gave them everything he had, and they just couldn't rally enough pieces around him to help him out and pick him up in this. He's picked everyone up throughout the season. And at Oregon State, the defense really picked him up. They needed the defense to really step up in this game when Caleb Williams was banged up, and it didn't happen.
And we were both on the field for the game. To finish it on a personal level, what you saw from the players, the reactions to Utah's win throughout the game, after the game, what was just your overall reaction from the field?
I want to start before the game. I was on a Sirius XM talking with the Pac-12 guys there, and they asked me, what's the scene like? Is USC, the former players and stuff there? And it was Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart. Mark Sanchez is talking to Carson Palmer. Willie McGinnis is down. You got Keyshawn Johnson talking with Marquise Lee. Like, all the former players came out and were excited to be, in the scene. You had Marcus Allen is heckling Reggie Bush on stage. He's the former Helix High Stars and Heisman winners. You had 5 Heisman Trophy winners on the field at one time, including Caleb Williams. So that just shows you the star power that USC has. So let's start there. And USC, that tells you that the alum are excited about this. This place was rocking tonight. It was an awesome atmosphere, sold out. And I looked up in the at the top, to when my camera was trying to see in the dark shadows if there were empty seats. No empty seats. Everyone was here. It was loud. I would give the Utah fans, they were a little bit more loud, I would say, during the game. Give them credit there. But then, as the game went on, at the end of the game, just seeing the players sitting on the bench, the defensive players, just kind of looking forlorn, looking forward into the abyss. Some players trying to hold back tears. Tuli Tuipulotu seemed to kind of be in his own kind of aura. He was trying not to cry. Probably thinking about, he's got one more game after this, the potential that he could have been in the playoff. Instead, he's going to be, playing in a different bowl game. But then after the game, see some of the players walked off, and, Austin Jones was bawling. A couple of other players were tearing up and whatnot. I thought it was interesting that some of the defensive players and Caleb Williams, a couple other guys, stayed around. The staffers had to actually usher them off the field. They stayed. They wanted to see Utah celebrate and try to probably take that as motivation into this offseason to see, the pain that it feels watching that they don't ever want to have that again. So it was interesting to see some of the players stick around and kind of watch that. But yeah, it was definitely emotional on the USC sideline because they realized the opportunity that they gave up in this game, and we know the reasons why it happened, but you look at it, the potential to be in the college football playoff in the first year of Lincoln Riley. Instead, still going to be a great season when you look back in a few years to what they were able to do, but not able to stick that feather in their hat, not be able to have that ring, the championship ring. That one, this was a ring game. They talked about that before. And to not be able to have that is going to be something that sticks with them throughout the offseason. That'll be the motivation as they go into the offseason. But again, they got to get more pieces. They got to get better depth, and the guys that are on the team have to start stepping up. The backups and whatnot, because they're going to lose a good number of quality players this offseason.
Yeah, I think that even though it's been a miraculous season for USC, we kind of knew this wasn't going to be the peak of USC under Lincoln Riley. They've got plenty to come in their future. We'd assume we're back here at Vegas to cover a USC Pac-12 Championship in the future. So I think the players want to take that as motivation. There'll be some of them coming back next year, including Caleb Williams. I think they'll want to make it back here and avenge the loss tonight. 2 losses to Utah as well, who has to go to the Coliseum next year, which I would expect to be a very tense game. But overall, great season for USC. We'll see what happens bowl game-wise. They did lose a big opportunity here today, but I think overall a good season where there'll be a lot of questions asked, and there'll be a lot of time to ask them before the bowl game, and we'll just see what kind of answers we get eventually. But that's all we've got for you guys today. Do you have any other thoughts before we wrap it up?
I fear for Utah what Caleb Williams will try to do to them next year. 2 losses to them. He's going to have that one circled as soon as the calendar comes out. But yeah, USC will have one more chance to win a Pac-12 championship in Las Vegas before they move on to the Big Ten. I don't see any reason why they can't, as long as they address some of the areas of need, and that's going to start with the offensive line, because when you lose Brett Nealon, you lose Andrew Voorhees. We saw what it was like at the end of the game. They're going to have to add some pieces there and get some quality guys coming in here to be in that mix and that rotation. So we'll see what USC can do in the next couple weeks. The future of what they can do next year, a lot of it will be decided in the next couple weeks, to be honest, and what the transfer portal and the windows now, and then the early signing period for the high school players. So a lot will be determined in the next couple weeks. So even though USC did not win, you're going to want to stick around to uscfootball.com and check out everything that's going on, because there's going to be a lot of news happening in the next couple weeks as we find out the bowl game and all that stuff next week as well.
Just because they don't play until maybe New Year's doesn't mean that we don't have any work to do for the next couple of weeks. But that's all we've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning in to this game and all season long. We hope there's another one of these after the bowl game, potentially. But if there's not, I've been with Shotgun Spratling, and I'm Jack Smith. Make sure you're checking out uscfootball.com for all the great articles. Subscribe here on YouTube to watch all the interviews from today. But thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you later.